An IELTS letter is the task 1 for general training. There are 3 types of letter that you may come across in this task: formal, semi-formal and informal. Each of these open and close in a different way. You will be given all or some of your phrases for opening the letter in the prompt. However, you must decide how to close the letter. So why is opening and closing a letter important? Well, making sure you know the right phrases and using them for opening or closing a letter is very important. Either getting it wrong or not using one could bring your score down to a band 5 or even band 4 for task achievement, which is 25% of the score. For example, with a formal letter, opening with Dear Mick or ending it with All the Best will be viewed as getting the tone and or format wrong. So we'll now take a look at the best way to open and close IELTS letters. So first we'll look at formal letters. A formal letter will usually be to some kind of private or public institution, such as a bank, an insurance company, an airline, a local council. This means that you're usually writing to someone that you do not know. So we'll look at an example of a prompt. So your local council wants to close a community football ground near you because not many people use it. So write a letter to the local council. You need to explain why many people use the ground, why the ground is important, and suggestions how people using it could be increased. So you'll see it says, begin your letter as follows: Dear Sir or Madam. So you'll note that for a formal letter where you will not know who you're writing to, you say Dear Sir or Madam. This is provided in the prompt, so you should follow the instructions and open the letter like this. This phrase is common practice when we're writing a formal letter to somebody we do not know. So we'll show how you'd structure, and then we'll look at closing the letter first of all. So the way you open it determines how you close it. You gave it a formal opening using Sir or Madam, and therefore it needs a formal closing. So if you've opened the letter as above, then this is how you close it: Yours faithfully. You can then place your name or any made-up name after it. So your final letter will look like this: Dear Sir or Madam, the content of your letter, yours faithfully, Ian Smith, or any other name you want to use. So we'll now look at a semi-formal letter. So a semi-formal letter will usually be to someone you know, or at least you know their name, even if you do not know them well. So for example, a landlord, an employer, a librarian, a doctor, school counsellor, a teacher. So let's look at an example, a prompt again. So your child is going on a school trip to another city for the day. The head teacher of the school is looking for parents to go with the group and would like you to volunteer. So write a letter and say to the head teacher, say why you'd like to go, what you could do to help, and ask some questions about the trip. So this is one you can see at the bottom. It says, begin your letter as follows: Dear. So you'll note then that for a semi-formal letter, you put Dear when you know who you're writing to. So you should follow the instructions and do it this way. This is common practice when we're writing a semi-formal letter to somebody you know but you're not close to. You should then follow this by a title and then a surname. So for example, Dear Mrs. Taylor, so you can just make that up. So just use Mr., Mrs., Miss, Ms. And in closing the letter, when we close it, or when we close a letter in which we have used a name, unlike in the formal letter where no name was used, we close it like this: Yours sincerely. It would also not be a problem if you use these other common closing phrases: kind regards, best regards, regards, and again you can just add a full name after this. So the opening and closing of your final letter will look like this: Dear Mrs. Taylor, the content of your letter, yours sincerely, then the name. So let's look at an informal letter. So So an informal letter will be to someone you know very well and you know their name, for example a friend or relative. So let's look at an example again of a prompt. So you've recently moved to a different house. Write a letter to an English-speaking friend. In your letter, explain why you've moved, describe the new apartment, and invite him or her to pay a visit. And you can see again it says begin your letter as follows. Dear. So with opening the letter, you'll note then that for an informal letter it is the same as a semi-formal letter, and you should start your letter as per the instructions, so dear. But as it is a friend, rather than using a title, e.g. Mrs. Jones, you should just use a first name, which of course you can invent. So for example, Dear Susan. And in closing the letter, there are a variety of options we can choose to close it, depending on what type of person you are or how well you know the friend or family member. Some less personal ways are similar to those that can also be used for a semi-formal letter. For example, best wishes, best regards, regards, or more personal, all the best, see you around, lots of love if it's somebody you're very close to or family, always and forever. So you would then follow this with a first name. So your final letter will look like this. Dear Mick, for example, content of your letter, all the best, Ian. So the summary for opening and closing a letter. So your formal letter is Dear Sir or Madam, the content, yours faithfully, then just the name, for example, Ian Smith. A semi-formal letter, Dear Mrs. Taylor, content, yours sincerely, and then the name. And an informal letter, so for example, Dear Mick, the content, all the best, and then just the first name you can put.